Three people are dead because a man behind the wheel of a semi decided that rules were optional. According to Florida Highway Patrol and local reporting, a tractor-trailer driver traveling north on Florida's Turnpike near Fort Pierce attempted a U-turn through an official use-only median opening around mile marker 170-171. A northbound minivan in the inside lane slammed into the side of that trailer and became wedged underneath it. The driver and two passengers were killed. The truck jackknifed and came to rest on top of the van. This was not a freak act of God. It was a choice, an illegal maneuver on a limited access highway where U-turns are explicitly banned. Officials have now arrested a driver identified as Harjinder Singh and charged him with 3 counts of vehicular homicide. The Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles says he entered the U.S. illegally in 2018 and ICE has placed a hold for removal proceedings. That's not rumor, that's official. And if you're wondering how someone in that situation ended up piloting an 80,000-pound vehicle on one of the country's busiest toll roads, you're not alone. Florida Turnpike rules aren't ambiguous. The Turnpike's own guidance tells drivers U-turns are only permitted at service plazas roughly every 40 miles, not across live lanes, not through emergency crossovers, not just this once. There is a written U-turn policy and signs make it clear. No U-turn, official use only. The driver didn't just make a mistake. He violated rules that exist because this exact scenario. Blocking high-speed traffic with a 53-foot trailer kills people. On social media, truckers, people who actually live on these roads were blunt. Illegal U-turn, killing a family of 3, wrote one. U-turn from the right lane, who gave him a CDL? Asked another. It's crude? Yes, but it captures something very real. Professional drivers know you don't cut a semi across live lanes on a turnpike. They know because the first rule of survival in a big rig is respect physics. You can't negotiate with 40 tons. And yet, the state also says this driver held a commercial driver's license issued in California. That detail rocketed across internet because California famously created AB60 licenses for people who can't prove legal presence. But AB60 licenses are non-commercial. By federal rules, CDLs require lawful status documentation. Even California's DMV says commercial applicants must meet those federal requirements. So how do you reconcile a CDL with someone who's been unlawfully present since 2018? Was there an employment authorization document at some point? Was there a paperwork failure? Or was this another example of corruption cases we've seen before, where DMV workers took bribes to push through CDLs for unqualified applicants? We don't know the answer yet, but the question is obvious because the system is confusing by design, and because CDL fraud rings have existed before. Before you get lectured about how speed limiters would have prevented this, remember what actually happened here. The Department of Transportation just withdrew its proposed national speed limiter rule in July. Regardless of how you feel about that, a limiter doesn't stop you from swinging a trailer across traffic. This was not a speed problem. It was a judgment problem, a training problem, and arguably an enforcement problem. You can't regulate common sense into existence, but you can set standards, enforce them, and keep unqualified drivers out of the cab. Period. What about training? We were told a big federal fix arrived in 2022, Entry-level driver training. New CDL applicants have to complete standardized coursework and behind-the-wheel training from a registered provider before taking the skills test. Great on paper, but does anyone believe paper standards alone will prevent a driver from ignoring giant official use-only signs and carving a U-turn across a turnpike? Standards help. They don't cure recklessness, and they definitely don't replace state and employer responsibility to vet, supervise, and when warranted, fire. Let's talk enforcement. Florida now mandates E-Verify for private employers with 25 or more employees. If this driver worked for a Florida-based company of that size, they were legally obligated to verify employment eligibility for new hires. If he didn't, why not? If the carrier was based out of state, what did their hiring look like? Are we going to ask those questions, or are we going to pretend the process is entirely random and unknowable? Because the law here, it's unclear either. And if you care about road design, there is another piece almost no one is talking about. Underride. The minivan went under the trailer. That's a classic side underride scenario, which is why for years safety advocates and regulators have debated whether to require side underride guards on semi-trailers. Today, there is no federal requirement for side guards. In Europe, some forms of lateral protection have been required for decades. Here, we're still talking. Maybe it's time to stop talking. Side guards don't fix stupidity, but they can turn a fatal underride into a survivable crash. Now, you'll hear a lot about nuclear verdicts in trucking. In Florida, tort reform over the last 2 years has indeed driven down some of the biggest awards. Depending on your politics, you either cheer that as sanity or lament it as tilting against victims. In this case, 3 families will be looking for answers and accountability. It would be obscene if the only people who pay a price are the dead. The point of a justice system isn't just to send one man to prison. It's to change the incentives upstream so other men don't make the same decision. What actually prevents the next one? First, relentless enforcement of limited access rules. The Turnpike publishes the rules. Enforce them. If emergency crossovers are magnets for illegal U-turns, upgrade the barriers and conspicuous physical deterrents and install cameras that auto-flag cross-median movements by unauthorized vehicles. If we can read license plates from space to send a toll bill, we can read a tractor-trailer making forbidden U-turn. Second, end the paperwork fog around licensing. If Florida's version is we're not responsible, California issued CDL, and California's answer is the feds set the status rules, and the federal government says states issue licenses, not us, then no one is responsible, which is how you get a man with a questionable status and a big rig. Harmonize the database checks. If the CDL requires legal presence or an employment authorization document, that status should be verified continuously, not just an issuance. Make it automatic, like the FMCSA Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, which already flags prohibited drivers to states for downgrades. We've built these systems before, we can connect them, for sure. Third, stop fetishizing the wrong regulations. We just watched DOT scrap the national speed limiter push. Whatever you think of limiters, explain how a 65 mile per hour governor stops a 5 mile per hour U-turn across live lanes. It does not. The real safety gains come from ruthless competence, training that emphasizes judgment, carriers that won't tolerate recklessness, and state troopers who actually appear on the highway. Truckers on the ground say it all the time. Florida enforcement can feel like the Wild West between state lines. Maybe that's something to fix. Finally, be honest about what killed these people. Was it immigration, road design, training, enforcement? The answer is yes. Parts of all of it. But at the center of the story is a single decision. A driver choosing to pivot a trailer across two live lanes on a turnpike where that is forbidden, obvious, and deadly. Everything else, the policy debates, the paperwork, the lawsuits, matters because it can reduce the number of times a human being makes that choice and takes a life. 3 are gone because the system and the driver failed them. The measure of whether we're serious is whether anything changes before the next family meets a trailer at 70 miles an hour. Today, the temptation will be to turn this into a morality play about your favorite team. Immigration, hardliners blaming the border, industry lobbyists blaming trial lawyers, safety crusaders blaming DOT, and politicians blaming each other. The adult answer is simpler and colder. Put competent people in the cab, verify they're allowed to be there, hammer anyone who is not, harden the places where physics and human error intersect, and stop pretending that a rule on paper is the same thing as a margin for life on a highway. That's not punitive. That's mercy for the next family that hasn't left home yet. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.